You've done the prep work, you've researched the company, you've thought through your answers. You feel as ready as you're going to feel. And then the interviewer leans forward and says, "So, walk me through your background. And I noticed that there's a gap here. Can you tell me about that?" And something happens in your body that has nothing to do with whether you're qualified for the job. Maybe your mind goes completely blank. Maybe you hear yourself start talking and you cannot find the stopping point. Maybe you've rehearsed a version of the story so many times that when it comes out, it sounds like someone else saying it. Or maybe you didn't even get to the interview because you looked at the application and thought, "I can't explain this," and closed the tab. If any of this sounds familiar, this episode is for you. Today we're talking about how to speak about your career history with confidence, including the parts that are complicated, the parts that are painful, and the parts that most career advice has no idea how to help you with. Did you know that trauma impacts how we navigate our careers, but most career advice ignores this reality? Imagine feeling confident and safe at work while honoring your healing journey. Welcome to your Trauma-Wise Career Guide, the podcast that reimagines career development for trauma survivors. I'm your host, Cyndi Bennett, a trauma survivor turned trauma-informed career coach and founder of the Resilient Career Academy. If you're navigating your career while honoring your healing journey, you are in the right place. I want to start by naming something that I think a lot of people carry privately. There is a particular kind of shame that lives around a complicated career history, around the experiences themselves, yes, and around the fact that talking about them is so hard. You watch other people seem to glide through interviews, narrating their career arc with ease, and you wonder, what is wrong with you? Here's what I want you to hear. Nothing is wrong with you. What you're navigating is genuinely harder than what most career coaches are trained to address. When I look at the patterns I see most often in people I work with, they tend to cluster around 4 experiences. I'm going to name all 4 because I want you to recognize yourself in at least one of them before we go any further. The first is the freeze. Someone asks you why you left a job or asks you to explain a gap, and your mind empties. What you actually lived through was complicated and stressful, and there's no clean sentence for it. So your brain does what brains do when they can't find a safe path forward. It stalls. And every second of silence feels like proof that something is wrong with you, when really it's just proof that the question touched something real. The second is the spiral. You start answering and you cannot find the stopping point. You give them context they didn't ask for. You over-explain. You apologize. You hear yourself saying things you didn't plan to say. And afterward, you replay the whole thing on a loop, wondering why you gave so much away to someone who hadn't earned any of it. The third is the performance. You have a rehearsed version of the story. It's technically accurate. Nothing you say is a lie. But when you deliver it, you feel hollow inside because the version of you in that answer isn't the real version. It's the version that felt safe enough to show a stranger. And that disconnection is its own kind of exhausting. The fourth is the avoidance. You stop applying. You tell yourself the job probably wasn't right for you anyway. And maybe that's sometimes true. But sometimes it's the fear talking, and somewhere underneath it, you know the difference. I invite you to sit with that for a moment. Which one of those lives most in your body right now? I want to talk about why this happens, because understanding the why actually changes how you approach doing something different. When we have spent time in professional environments that were unsafe, unpredictable, or controlled by people who use their power against us, our nervous system learns from that. It learns that workplaces are places to be careful. It learns that transparency carries risk. It learns that the people asking questions in professional settings are people to be measured with. And then we walk into an interview and someone asks us to be open about the most vulnerable parts of our professional history, and our nervous system responds accordingly. It does exactly what it was trained to do. It protects us. The freeze, the spiral, the performance, the avoidance, these are protective strategies. They made sense in environments that taught them to you. The work we're doing here is about building new strategies that actually serve where you're trying to go. Here's something else worth naming. Most interview advice operates from an assumption that the person being interviewed is a neutral party who simply needs better talking points. It doesn't account for the fact that for some of us, narrating our own professional history in front of a stranger activates something much older than a job search. When someone asks, "Why did you leave?" they're technically asking a professional question. And if you left because the environment was harmful, or because your mental health was in crisis, or because you stayed far longer than was good for you and you're still making sense of that, the question lands somewhere much deeper than the interviewer intended. You are allowed to know that. You are allowed to hold that truth without being obligated to hand it over to someone who has not yet earned access to it. Here is the reframe I invite you to try on. Your story is yours. The portion you share in an interview is a professional excerpt. Your full story includes everything that happened, the circumstances you didn't choose, the environments that shaped you in ways you're still working through, the decisions you made under pressure, the cost of staying and the cost of leaving. The story belongs to you. You don't owe it to a hiring manager. The professional excerpt is something different. It's the part of your story that is honest, professionally relevant, and serves your goal of moving forward. Choosing what to include in that excerpt is professional discernment. It is the same thing every person in that interview room is doing, including the person on the other side of the table. Let me give you a few structural shapes for what this actually sounds like in practice. These are patterns to make your own, not scripts to memorize. For departure, I left the role because the environment wasn't sustainable for the kind of work I wanted to do. What I took from that experience was something specific and true about yourself or your work. Going forward, I'm looking for something specific you now know you need. That's a complete answer. You've named an outcome, offered something genuine, and pointed forward. For a gap, there's a gap in my timeline because I was navigating a health situation, a family circumstance, a significant life transition. And during that time, something you did, even something small, I'm at a place now where what's different, what you're ready for. Again, that is enough. You are not required to justify every month to someone who is, at this point, still essentially a stranger. The principle underneath both of these is the same. Name what's relevant. Offer something true. Point toward where you're going. I want to spend some time on the jobs that were hard, the places you stayed, the roles where something genuinely difficult happened, the tenures that might show up on paper in ways that concern you. A few things I want you to hear. You do not have to speak loudly about the organization or the people in order to be honest. I know that might feel counterintuitive if what you experienced was genuinely harmful. The practical reality is that speaking negatively about a former employer, even when what you're saying is completely true, tends to raise more questions than it answers. It wasn't a healthy environment for me. Tells them what they need to know. You are also allowed to acknowledge difficulty directly. Something like, there were some significant challenges in that environment that I've spent a lot of time reflecting on. What I came away with was something specific and true. This names something real without requiring you to prove your experience to someone who wasn't there. If your performance was visibly affected during a difficult period, you can speak to that on your own terms. Something like, there was a period where I was managing some significant pressures, and my performance reflected that. Since then, what shifted, what you understand now that you didn't then, that moves the conversation forward. It is professional ownership, not self-punishment. I also want to name something that comes up often here. A lot of people who have been through hard workplace experiences carry an old belief that they have to confess everything, or the interviewer will find it out anyway. That total transparency is the only protection against being caught. I invite you to examine that belief carefully. Ask yourself whether it's actually keeping you safe or whether it's asking you to make yourself small in a situation that doesn't require it. I want to close with something practical because some of you are listening to this with an interview coming up and you need something you can actually use. Preparation means getting grounded in your own story so the question doesn't blindside your nervous system. Rehearsing a polished version until it feels like someone else's lines feeds the hollow feeling rather than relieving it. One of those serves you, the other one doesn't. Here's what the useful kind of preparation actually looks like. Write it out for yourself first. Write out what actually happened, what it cost you, what you learned, what you carry differently now. You are not going to show this to anyone. You're writing it so the story has somewhere to live in your body, somewhere where it can settle rather than circling as anxiety in your chest. This step matters more than people realize. From that, find the 2 or 3 true things you want them to know, the excerpt. The part that is honest, that reflects your growth, and that points toward where you're going. Say those things out loud, alone, until they sound like yours. Give yourself permission to pause in the room. You are allowed to say, "That's a good question. Let me take a moment to think about how I want to answer that." A grounded pause is more compelling than an anxious rush of words, and most interviewers respect that. And know your stopping point before you walk in. Decide in advance when you've said enough. When you reach it, stop. Let the silence sit. You do not have to fill it. The urge to keep talking is one of the places the spiral lives, and you get to choose not to go there. At the beginning of this episode, I put you in a chair across from an interviewer who just asked you about a gap. I want to come back to that moment. The version of you that froze was not failing. The version of you that spiraled was not broken. The version of you that delivered a clean story that didn't feel true was doing the best you could with what you had. And the version of you that stopped applying altogether was protecting yourself in the only way that felt available at the time. You are building something different now, a more grounded presence, a relationship with your own story that is honest and boundaried and yours. Your history is complicated, so are you. And I want to say clearly, that is often what makes someone a thoughtful colleague, a perceptive leader, a professional who understands things about working with people that simply cannot be learned any other way. You get to walk into that room as someone who knows what happened, knows what they learned, and knows where they're going. If you're ready to work through your own career story with support, I'd love to talk. You can book a free discovery call through the link in the show notes. And if this episode resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you shared it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you haven't already, subscribing means you won't miss what's coming next. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Your Trauma-Wise Career Guide. I'll see you next time. You're not walking this path alone. Every step you take toward a trauma-wise career is an act of courage, and I'm here cheering you on. If today's episode resonated with you, share it with another survivor who needs to hear this message. Together, we're rewriting the rules of career success. Keep rising, keep healing, keep building.